You asked for it, and it's finally here. This is a 6-speed manual 2023 Toyota GR Supra. This particular car we have today is a premium model, and we'll be walking through all of the new changes, specifically focusing on that transmission and letting you know if it's worth it for you. So this is the 2023 Toyota GR Supra, which when it first launched in 2020 was not available with a manual transmission. It was only an 8-speed automatic. Now, in order to make a manual happen, which has been much requested by the enthusiast base for the Supra, they had to figure some things out. So the BMW Z4, of which the Toyota Supra is based on, is actually not offered with a manual transmission here in the United States. So Toyota had to do some research. They actually partnered up with BMW and the German transmission supplier ZF to look into their options. So it turns out the BMW Z4 has a manual overseas available on the 4-cylinder option. So Toyota decided to go ahead and use that transmission, but it would require some updates and some changes. So one of the things that would be adjusted would of course be things like the gear ratio, but Toyota also wanted that transmission to be specific to the Toyota Supra. So you won't find it on any of the BMW Z4 options here in the US or the overseas models for that matter. And one of the other things that they did is Toyota worked to develop a specific shift feel. They really wanted it to feel like a proper performance car and make it feel like a very recognizable Toyota transmission, even though it is a BMW transmission that goes along with the rest of our BMW powertrain. Now, the Toyota Supra, this particular car, comes in around $57,000, and today we'll be going through the exterior, the interior, the powertrain, and of course, we'll take it for a drive. So starting with the exterior of this car, our car is finished in Stratosphere Blue, which is actually a premium paint option, so you will be looking at about $500 if you decided you wanted your Supra finished in this fantastic blue. Now for 2023, the styling remains relatively unchanged from 2020. I will still highlight some of the various features and things that exist on the outside of the car just so you're aware, but it's relatively the same. So starting at the front, we do have our LED headlights, which I think look absolutely fantastic and also are accompanied by LED daytime running lights. The front nose is something I've always been a fan of, especially when we first saw the initial FT1 concept come out, which has since changed. They've had to adjust the body lines of the FT1, which was a very low car, to fit on the BMW Z4 hardpoints. But aside from that, this looks fantastic, and I think the front nose is even sort of reminiscent of the Mark IV Supra, and even looking back at some of the profile, we have our double bubble roof on the back there, which looks fantastic and makes it look extra sporty. Now, coming around to some of my favorite features, aside from some of the added aero bits on the side, are these wheels in particular. So these wheels are 19 inches all around, and this particular is a 10-spoke that has these graphite alloy finish, and it looks fantastic, perhaps one of the best wheels available for the Supra. And on top of that, it's actually wrapped in Michelin Pilot Super Sport. So you have some fairly sticky tires that you get when you buy the car new, and of course they're fantastic to do some more sporty driving with. Behind these wheels, we actually have red Brembo brakes in the front, which has these fairly sizable discs, and of course you also have some more red brake calipers in the rear, just more accenting that. And we have some cool Supra font on the calipers, which I think is a nice touch because it makes you feel like you're getting a little bit more for your money. As we continue down the side of the car, we do have a black A-pillar here. Nothing too crazy. You get keyless entry. We have some fake vents that are around the car that could be removed and changed and added if you found some sort of performance use for them. We keep coming around to the rear. We have these nice big quarter panels and haunches. We have LED taillights in the rear, and then we have some more interesting features. So obviously we have our Toyota and our Supra badging, but we have this nice little F1 taillight to add to some of the sportiness, and we can see our exhaust, which of course in this particular car we actually have the active exhaust that gets paired with our awesome engine. Now, one of the other interesting parts is because this is Z4 based, we do have a key fob that is definitely a BMW Z4 key fob, but we can go ahead and pop our trunk from back here. which if we go ahead and open up, has 10 cubic feet of space plus this little handy cover which you can disconnect if you don't need it, but it's nice to have that additional privacy. And the other cool part is this goes directly into the interior, which is where we'll be moving next shortly, but we can even see some of the bigger speakers for our premium audio system. So more details, let's move to the inside. So now that we're on the inside of our 2023 Toyota Supra, just by looking at everything, this is absolutely a BMW Z4. So all these buttons, the gauges, everything, the way it's displayed is all very much BMW, and then you have some Toyota engineering that's been applied. So first and foremost, we are sitting in our heated powered sports seats, which have a fair amount of bolstering in there. I can feel them. There's not a ton of shoulder support. Really, there's no shoulder support, but it holds you fairly tight in the waist, in the midsection, that it's pretty good if you're going to be doing your fun sporty canyon driving. Now, some of the cool details that I like, now you do have digital displays for both the center here and what's in front of you, but it's a really interesting driver display as far as your gauges go. Not only do you have the tach first and foremost right in front of you, which is a fantastic sports car move, but on top of that, you actually have an active gauge display. I like this display because it's fairly simple, only shows you what you really need, but on top of that, it actually has an active display that shows your gears. So right now we're in neutral with the shifter in the middle, but as you move it through, which you can kind of hear the notchiness of our shifter as you move it through the gears, but it'll keep it updated showing your various gear, which is just a nice touch, because if you forget you're white knuckled focusing on the road, it'll tell you which gear you're in, and you know that you either need to downshift, upshift, whatever the case, looking at your tach. So that's kind of a neat touch. Glad that's in there. Makes you feel a little bit more driver focused when you're looking at the car. We actually do have dual climate control, so you can control the temperature separate on the passenger side from the driver's side, even though you both get these awesome bucket seats. Moving on to our center display here, what we have is a bit of a navigation menu, but we actually have wireless Apple CarPlay. But what you don't get is Android Auto, which is a bit of a unique one. Most displays or media systems tend to have both, but what they do have is a Super Connect system, so you can download an app. It's basically the BMW Connect system. You can download an app on your phone if you have an Android, and then you can use it that way, or even just plug it in through a USB port, which we actually have located right here, right in front of our wireless charger, which is a nice touch. And then I did mention we have all this beautiful carbon fiber in the center here, along with some of our physical controls, even though this is a touchscreen display as well. But we have that shifter, which I talked about is kind of specific. It can come in Alcantara on some other models, but it sits right here in the front, and it's available, and obviously it's very unique. It's got GR badging on it. It wants you to feel like you're using a Toyota shifter, and they do a good job at that, because again, this is essentially a BMW transmission, but it was engineered by Toyota, so it is going to be different than anything you'll find on any BMW. Over here, we do have some of our other options like traction control, your auto start, sport modes, which will adjust your adaptive suspension, all that type of stuff that exists, our safety systems, and then even our electronic park brake back here. One of the things that I'm not sure how I feel about is actually our cup holders. So our cup holders are actually located back here, but if your hand is on the shifter, you'll notice that my elbow currently is sitting over the cup holder. So for me personally, I'm only able to have one drink in it at a time, which usually sits back here. But maybe you're shifting, if you shift like this, maybe you could put more back here, but that's just some personal preferences. You do have some various steering wheel controls, and the steering wheel itself is fantastic, along with some other interesting bits that make it just a little bit easier to use, like having the trunk pop available here over on the door side as well. And then as for the audio system, we have a 12-speaker JBL audio system that is fairly good. Sometimes at the lower volumes, it can sound a little bit empty, but as you turn it up, you can even adjust it a little bit. It tends to sound fantastic, especially with the speakers right behind you that I mentioned earlier, as the Supra does not have a back seat. But just in terms of space is one thing I did want to touch on. I'm about 6 foot for reference, and you can see where my head is in comparison to the roof. You don't have a ton of backwards adjustability for those of you that are taller than me, and I did try to fit my 6'4" friend in the car, and he had a little bit of a hard time climbing in. So you're definitely going to want to sit in the car and test it out, make sure that it works for you and that you can fit in it. But now I think it's time to move on to the powertrain. So now let's take a look under the hood of our 2023 Toyota Supra. So first off, we have all these engine covers that sit up top here. We can see our Toyota badge, but tell you what, it doesn't take very far to find your first BMW badge, which sits just right here on the side. So just to remind you that this is in fact a BMW powertrain, our B58 motor, but in this case, our turbocharged inline-6 is producing 382 horsepower and 368 pound-feet of torque for the 2023 model year. At least that's what it's rated at. Winky face on that one. Now this motor is paired with a 6-speed manual transmission that does have rev matching, but it also comes with some other interesting goodies like our sport rear differential, which should be limited slip. Now, because this has so much power, almost 400 in fact, some say when you dyno these cars you can actually get over 400 horsepower, this car has a fairly brisk 0 to 60 because the car weighs just 3,400 pounds, so not too bad when you consider that. So you have 0 to 60 in about 3.9 seconds, it'll run a quarter mile in about 12.4 seconds, and then it has an electronically limited top speed of 155 miles per hour. So not too shabby. This is certainly a fast car, way faster than you can go legally anywhere on any roads, but should be plenty quick should you decide to take it to a track day. And it's a pretty interesting power point. It sounds good, and obviously it's very similar to what would have come in the Mark IV Supra. Now on top of that, let's talk fuel economy. Perhaps not the main reason that you would buy a sports car, but just something we should cover and touch our bases nonetheless. Now this car is the EPA rating of 19 city and 27 highway, which is actually worse than the automatic transmission that's available, which has a top highway of 31 miles per gallon. So that's kind of an unusual trait. Typically when you get a manual transmission, sometimes it's 1 or 2 miles per gallon higher than the automatic, just because you can shift early and keep it in your overdrive gears. But nonetheless, the combined rating is about 21 miles per gallon, which combined with the fact that this has a 13.7 gallon fuel tank means that you should get just below 300 miles per gallon, or miles of range in one trip based on this car. And I will say in my experience that is found to be true. I burned through a tank in less than 300 miles. So your experience may vary based on how you drive it, like I mentioned, if you shift early, etc. But there it is. There's our power plant, which sends power to the rear wheels and sounds absolutely fantastic. Just listen to the revs. So, what's it like to drive the brand new Toyota Supra? So first and foremost, there is a nice feature for the emergency brake here, or the parking brake I should say, that as you go to leave and you step on the gas, it automatically disables, which has been a staple for automatic transmissions for a while now, but it is just a little nice luxury feature that I appreciate with the manual transmission as well, that could just add to some of that driving comfort, and it's the little things that can make a big difference in the overall driving experience. But let's move into perhaps the most interesting part of the part you may be most excited to hear about, which is about the manual transmission. So first and foremost, it does exactly what any manual transmission does for any car. It's going to improve the engagement and the sort of driving feel when it comes to driving the car. Now this particular unit, being specifically made for the Toyota Supra, is of course going to be a unique experience that won't be replicated even if you were to have the overseas BMW Z4, which of course that transmission was actually used on a 4-cylinder model, which in this case we have the inline 6, the turbocharged engine. So a bigger engine, different engine that the transmission would have originally been anticipated to connect with. Just getting straight into the feel. First, the clutch has this sort of weird springy nature to it. It almost feels kind of bouncy, and sometimes it can regard in getting some weird shifts that sometimes don't feel all that smooth at low speeds, but can sometimes be a little bit better if you're driving the car a bit more aggressively. Now, just for the sake of getting some audio, we're actually about to get onto the freeway on-ramp here as well, and you can hear some of the blips from the auto rev matching. So as we're getting on the freeway on-ramp, get some noise. Oh, yes. So the car's certainly fast. There's no doubt about that as we get onto the freeway here. 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds, but the general shifter feel is also kind of vague. So you have this weird springy clutch with this vague shifter that can be sometimes kind of hard to get into reverse, but then sometimes kind of hard to figure out where you are necessarily in the right gear, which makes it even more important that in the driver display, it actually shows you what gear you're in, because sometimes it can be kind of hard to tell, but the shifter is a little bit notchy, which gives you a more confident feeling as you do throw the car into gear. So that's just my specific take on it. Obviously, you'll definitely want to take this car on a drive for yourself to decide what you're into. If you're familiar with BMW transmissions, you might know exactly what I'm talking about, or might be already familiar with the car. Now let's move on to the other driving characteristics about the Toyota Supra. Now, sports car wise, the general street driving modes not in sport mode for the car is fantastic. The car is stiff, but not too stiff. The steering is soft so that you're not getting a crazy workout, but it still feels direct enough where you can have a sporty driving experience. And the car, of course, has a very low center of gravity and feels fantastic, confidence instilling as you're taking it into turns. when you put the car in sport, everything stiffens up with that adaptive suspension. The car wants to hold out the gears a little bit more. The active exhaust that you have gets a little bit louder, which is always a good thing because the car sounds incredible. One of the perks of having that inline six is, of course, the beautiful sound that it makes. But would have appreciated just a little bit more sound in the cabin. I really like the way it sounds, so more of that would always be good. But of course, you can always roll the windows down for that. Just for general visibility, it's pretty good. You have a little bit of a blind spot with the way that the back window sits, but all in all, it's not that bad. The A-pillars don't block too much. You just have a fairly narrow viewport here that's pretty easy to see out of. And the rev matching is kind of interesting too, because you can turn it off, of course, through the displays, and it's on the whole time. It doesn't get disabled depending on what drive mode you might put it in, like some cars. But as you put it in there, the rev matching is fairly quick. You get one quick blip, and if you're not shifting quite fast enough, your rev matching won't exactly be perfect, and therefore kind of defeats the whole purpose of it. So that, based on your driving preference, how quickly you're shifting, maybe you turn it off for the street, turn it on for the track, whatever the case is for your personal preference can be adjusted. So that's just a quick take on it. Obviously the manual is a huge plus, and we can expect that to be reflected in sales. So of course you vote with your money. If you really like the fact that they brought the manual transmission back for the enthusiast for the 2023 Toyota Supra, be sure to make sure that you check that out and give it a try, and of course vote with your wallet. So with that, that's going to be the end of the video. If you are looking for your next collector car, be sure to check out AutoHunter.com and ClassicCars.com. AutoHunter being our online auction with cars going live every single weekday, and ClassicCars.com, which is our online marketplace with over 30,000 cars currently live on the site. If you enjoyed the video, could hit that like button for us. We'd really appreciate it, and consider getting subscribed for more content like this in the future. Feel free to comment down below if you ordered a Supra or plan on buying a Supra. We'd love to hear about it, or what spec you ended up purchasing, and if you chose to go with the automatic, or you're excited for the brand new 6-speed manual transmission. With that, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.